Jack Elsom is the political editor at The Sun, who joins us. I mean, Tugendhat knows, security well in his previous position, of course, and I thought he spoke incredible, powerful speech there, Jack.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that many sides are trying to play politics with this, Labour against the Tories and Tories against Labour, trying to score points. Tom Tugendhat puts the whole thing in perspective and says at the heart of this is a severe issue of national security. You have two alleged Chinese spies who are passing information from the centre of Parliament to Beijing paymasters, and at the heart of it we have a Crown Prosecution Service who seems unable to bring a prosecution against these two men despite previously bringing charges, and we have a government seemingly unable to convince a despairing public that they did everything they could to try and secure this prosecution. Yeah. And I think that some of the statements coming out from the government just absolutely beggars belief, because they said, for example, that anything relating to the current government's position is immaterial to this case because it happened, the alleged crimes, under the previous Tory government. But then we saw the witness statements last night, and the ones that were submitted by the Deputy National Security Advisor under this government clearly reflected the current government's policy towards China, where it says stuff like, we want an open relationship with China because they've got economic opportunities, we challenge where we must.
That's a new line since last July.
Totally. And so we have these three witness statements.
Yep.
The one under the Tories, by Matthew Collins, was pretty forensic.
He's
and
the
damning.
Deputy
National Security Advisor. Pretty damning and forensic in chronicling exactly what these two men got up to. Then you have supplementary witness statements because the Crown Prosecution Service said, we don't think that this original witness statement actually characterises China as the threat, and that is the bar, they say, for prosecution and to bring this trial to court. But those subsequent witness statements didn't really provide a smoking gun as to explicitly labelling China a threat. In fact, what the Tories are alleging, it did the opposite. It said, we want an open dialogue with China for economic purposes.
Kemi Badenoch, I thought, really got to the heart of where one of the big issues, and there are many, as an issue of basic justice and security and all the rest of it, but there's also an issue about the credibility, and some might even say the stability of the Prime Minister himself. And she asked that question very directly. Are you literally saying that the Deputy National Security, not the National Security, the Deputy, actually made a lot of very, very key decisions on this, didn't even consult his boss, so therefore the boss didn't know, Jonathan Powell, and neither did the Prime Minister? And he said, yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and
to many people, that is unbelievable.
Totally. It's the point that Tom Tugendhat made at the end of the Commons statement this morning. He said, well, we might as well go home then. If ministers and special advisors and politicians are not going to be involved in top matters of national security, and you are deciding to leave it, not just to the civil service, but to one civil servant, then what are we here for? And he made the case, as the old adage, that ministers decide and advisors advise, and the lack of, I think, of ministerial oversight in this case, or even just any oversight, either by Jonathan Powell, the Deputy National Security Advisor's boss, any other cabinet secretary, it does seem to stretch credulity, I think.
It really does. It's an interesting story. We were talking in the office earlier, Jack. It's one of those stories that's now it's getting sort of really interesting, and I'm sure you will share this annoyance that as it gets interesting, a lot of areas of journalism forget. You're almost coming at the story halfway through. So a lot of people are now going, what is this? Who are these guys? I didn't know anything about this. You brilliantly explained the background to this. Just tell us who the two accused were then. Were they people that worked around Parliament? Were they people that were connected in some way to politics?
Yeah, so one of them, Christopher Cash, worked in Parliament as a researcher. He worked for Alicia Kearns, a Tory MP, who at the time was chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Important role in Parliament under a Tory government. The second man, Christopher Berry, was a teacher, had links to Christopher Cash, and together, allegedly, I mean, it's important to say both men deny these allegations, but the witness statements we had them going in pretty forensic detail about what they're up to. It was meeting someone from the Chinese Communist Party, handing over information about deals such as Huawei, Newport Wafer Fab, giving them sort of political intelligence about who's likely to be in the cabinet, who's not going to be in, who's up, who's down. And to be fair, that information just seemed pretty ropey because none of it actually happened to be true. Stuff like Tom Tugendhat's going to be in the cabinet, and he didn't end up doing that. Both men deny the charges, although if you actually read, and I think this is the second end of the coin, because the government are clearly coming under a lot of scrutiny here, but the Crown Prosecution Service as well, clearly they felt they needed more information to be able to press the charges. But if you read that, you think, why not just let that go to a jury? Because if you think, as the Director of Public Prosecutions, that you have a reasonable prospect of conviction, and judging from everything that I've read in these witness statements, it's hard to see how a jury wouldn't at least look at that information. It's, I think, incumbent on them now, the Director of Public Prosecutions, to explain exactly why they dropped the case.
Yeah.
They said to MPs yesterday, he had a chat with some senior MPs, Stephen Parkinson, who's the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he said, we had 95% of the way there to bring this to trial. We were just missing a 5%, which we believe was explicitly labelling China a threat, which under the Official Secrets Act, you'd have to have done to brought a conviction. But explicitly the information he needed now, I think, is what we really need to know, because many people will look at the information and go, they're bang to rights. How on earth was a prosecution not brought?
Yeah. Is that it now for them? I mean, is there, despite all that's going on and the questions and who knew what and who advised who and who might have had a quiet word with somebody but didn't have a quiet word with somebody, according to the, any public record of it, is it done? So these guys walk free. It can't now be kind of tried, or they can't go back to it and say, well, we're trying again.
I think it seems unlikely at the moment that a prosecution will be brought, not least because since the case collapsed, there's just been obviously so much commentary about it. You wonder whether or not it would have prejudiced the trial in the future. But the Prime Minister himself says he's very disappointed that this prosecution didn't go ahead. Obviously, everyone else is saying, well, you weren't that disappointed because you knew that the trial was about to collapse a few days before it did, and you didn't do anything to actually try and stop it. Now, Downing Street's line is, it would be absurd for a Prime Minister to get involved in the collapse of a court case, but when the Crown Prosecution Service themselves are asking the government for evidence, and the government is not forthcoming with that to a point which is sufficient, that's when lots of questions to be asked, and that's where it becomes a bit murky.
So in layman's terms, what some people allege is that the government want to retain a fairly rosy and very nice relationship with China.
And this is the nub.
There's a lot of money going between the two, well, maybe not between the two, there's a lot of our money going over there, and they facilitate quite a lot in this country. Don't upset the Chinese, even though they're a bit dodgy. And it took nothing for somebody to say the right thing for this to go away.
This is the absolute heart of the case, and it's easy to get sort of like lost in the actual reads of it, but the wood through the trees, I guess, is that not just this government, but the last government as well, have a very, very muddled position on China. Because on the one hand, they talk about a threat to national security, economic security. We hear about all these espionage attempts which are trying to penetrate the British state.
No TikTok on civil servants' phones,
Exactly.
All that stuff.
On the other hand, you have a government that still wants to do business with the second largest economy, a government who is cozying up to China. We've had many ministers going over there. I'm sure we'll see Keir Starmer there maybe next year, who want to do business with China. Keir Starmer met President Xi not too long ago, and so it's that contradiction at the heart of government which means that you have quite a weird position on China.
Because we're hearing that China has accessed UK classified secrets for years via this Chinese hub of some kind. I know that nations spy on each other to degrees, but it seems that these boys have got a PhD in it over there in China.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was chatting to someone pretty senior in government not too long ago about this big row about this Chinese super embassy, which is going to be built in London on the site of the Royal Mint. And they said, it's a total red herring. China are everywhere anyway. It doesn't matter just because they have a massive building in the middle of London. They can access basically anything. Their hacking is so sophisticated.
Yeah, like the TikTok on the phone thing. It doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And the espionage attacks are so pervasive. And if you chat to people in the sort of top of government, they just say that they are such a threat. What we need now, I think, is government to say that out loud and say, these guys are a threat to national security. Listen to people like Tom Tugendhat, Ian Duncan-Smith, who've been in the receiving end of it, rather than trying to do this weird tightrope where they go, oh, we need you for all this economy stuff, but we've got to say that you're doing a bad thing as well.
Indeed. It's not gone away then yet?
No, definitely not.
There's more to play out on this.
I think actually the witness statements that came out very late last night probably throw up more questions than they answered.
100%.
Because you have a situation where it looked like, despite the government saying that everything related to the previous government's administration and their current position on China did not matter, you appeared to have what was essentially Labour Party policy implemented in the final two witness statements, which happened under this government. They're saying that Matthew Collins, just was providing context to the current government's position. Why would he do that? I have to be careful how I frame this, but why would he do that in isolation?
Yes.
Like, why would he just think to go and put Labour Party policy into something which we've been told is not required and everything related to the previous government's position? And that, I think, is what we need to get to the bottom of.
And when the CPS see what he'd written, they go, well, there's no case here, because we need substantial evidence that they're a threat of something.
Yeah, exactly.
Jack, thank you. Great to see you. It's going to get more confusing. This is proper spy novel stuff, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah.
There's a Netflix show waiting to happen.
There was a killer line in the witness statement last night where Chris Cash turned to Chris Berry, allegedly, and said, "You're in spy territory now." And you sort of read this in black and white, and it does feel like you're in a sort of John le Carré.
John le Carré novel, yeah. Jack, thank you. Jack Elsom is, of course, the political editor at The Sun. Thanking him.